Alrighty. Hey everybody. Today we're going to continue our talking about some key issues of ethics. We talked a bit about freedom and paternalism specifically last time. To remind us, we've got our 7 issues are, oh no, that works, birth, death. We're going to try all of these again. Pleasure, the greatest good, for the greatest number, desire and the meaning of life, freedom from the bad, freedom and paternalism. Man, this is super. Oh, but the blue one was the one that worked last time. Let's see if that'll take over today again. There we go. And paternalism. And rights. And natural rights. These are the key issues that Blackburn gives us as sort of ethical lightning rods, things that attract significant issues and raise significant problems for us. We had talked last time mostly about this one, freedom and paternalism. The idea of whether or not we could or should or would surrender our freedom of choice, the right to make decisions ourselves, in virtue or in favor of a world where we had better decisions than we would make made for us. An interesting point on that, by the way, is that you're getting closer to this the more and more automated the world becomes. Right? We talked a lot about people making decisions for us, experts, but artificial intelligences are making more and more decisions for us too. And as they get better and better and better, it's possible that we might not even notice that they're doing that. I don't know if any of you guys use Gmail. Have you noticed that they have predictive text in Gmail now? That's going to influence the way you talk, probably, or at least the way you write. Right? You'll start typing and it'll be like, how are, it looks like you doing today? You're like, yeah, that works. That's close enough. I was going to say something a little different, but I'll take that. More and more systems will make intelligent recommendations that will then govern our behaviors more and more substantially. And that's something we can circle back around to. Towards the end of last time, I had thought we could spend some more time, I guess, on the 2 things, and only 2 things, in life that you don't really get a choice about: birth and death. They kind of just happen to you. There are a lot of ethical issues that surround these. And they're particularly prominent because they end up being political issues as well. Right? They interact substantively with the kind of laws we have. For birth, there's going to be, of course, abortion. There's going to be birth control. A theme that a lot of you picked up on, but I don't think was made terribly explicit in the text, but you guys brought up several times: population control. And gene therapy. Altogether, these actually can be considered variations, or could be considered variation of eugenics, depending on how they're applied. Right? So eugenics is the practice of controlling the genetic makeup of your population to prevent the occurrence of certain disorders or what have you. And all of these can be tools for doing that, right? So selective abortion is one way to do that. You abort fetuses that have certain genetic traits, birth control for people with those traits, that sort of thing. Of course, there's also, especially with these two, sort of personal liberty issues, sort of versus a public morality. And a conflict between actual versus potential people. I'm going to say right off the bat that I've never found the abortion debate in philosophy classes to be particularly useful, because I'm just going to bet every single one of you already has an opinion. And I've probably encountered a fair number of counter-arguments and counter-opinions. And this is going to be an issue that's about as tired for you as it is for me. So while we might touch on that, I'm not going to dive right into that, because we'll just end up sitting on our camps and go nowhere. However, it does reveal an interesting basic principle that I think is worth talking about. Actual and potential personhood is a key ethical issue or key ethical question that arises in several places, and not just in questions of life and death, at least not immediate ones. So when we talked earlier on about personhood, remember we specifically drew the agent versus patient distinction. When we talk about this, we're mostly talking about patients. Actual versus potential personhood. We really want to know, do potential people have rights, and what kinds of rights do they have? Now this, first of all, this conversation only makes sense if you believe that actual people have rights. If you don't believe in rights at all, then the question kind of just falls out. And so there are people who think that this whole talk of rights is just a fancy way of establishing arbitrary rules. And that there's really nothing substantive to rights as a whole. So one person who might adopt this sort of view is a utilitarian or a consequentialist, and they're going to be interested in maximizing good. These bring different questions. So I guess one way to think about it is deontology. Remember, the Kantian deontologist we talked about is someone who believes that we should act only in universalizable ways. That is how we want everyone else to act. But deontology more generally means something like study of duty. And duty is kind of the opposite of rights, right? So I have a duty often translates to you have a right. I am obligated to because you are allowed to have, or something like that. Or you are mandated to have the access to. Not always, there might be duties that don't reflect in rights, but usually that I have a duty to respect you, to allow you to speak freely because you have a right to freedom of speech or something like that. So one way to look at this is sort of from a deontological point of view is going to be it's going to be a conflict of rights between actual and potential persons, or whether or not we have duties to potential people the way we have them to actual people. A consequentialist approach, this is that sort of outcome-based view. well, it'll depend on exactly what version. So if we just take a utilitarian approach here, which is one we talked about, is this greatest good for the greatest number. That's their slogan. It's going to be the scope of whose good we care about is how they define patency. So it's going to be do potential people count in our calculations? Right, so if we're trying to maximize happiness, happiness for whom? Some utilitarians will be very narrow. They'll say like our community, our government was a popular view in ancient Chinese thought, the sort of Mohist or I don't know how to pronounce the Chinese version of it. Anyway, Mohist is how it's anglicized. A philosopher named Mo Tzu, who believed that the purpose of morality is to behave in a way that is good for the state, or the purpose of humans, I suppose. But the more familiar sort of Western utilitarianism is one that is universal, all humans at least. There's some ambiguity. Do animals count, for instance? And among that ambiguity is do unborn people count? Another distinction that's useful to draw here too is within potential people. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of this probably going on today. There's something like in process and sort of far future. Describe it however you'd like. There's a difference probably, maybe, between a fetus and a merely possible person, right? As that is a being that has not even been conceived yet. Right, there's millions and millions of potential people. I mean, infinitely many, presumably. Potential people. And they, thousands of years from now, right, far distant future. But their way in which they are potential may be different in the way that a fetus is potential, right? Something like we've already started one of these things. The same way that if you put a pie in the oven already, you have a pie baking, so there was a potential pie. But also you could just go to the grocery store, buy a bunch of stuff. So there's also a potential pie in that sort of grander, less real, less started, less concrete way. So a lot of these debates come down to trying to describe the scope of patency. That is, define the boundaries at which you stop being a being of moral relevance, at which you stop mattering for moral purposes. There's actually an interesting analog of this in death as well. Does it matter how you treat the dead? This comes up a lot when you talk about sort of funerary customs and burial styles and that sort of thing. They're already dead. Does it really matter? Does anyone really care? Right. Does all this make sense so far? Yeah, Sabrina.
It's not like the whole idea of people going to cemeteries and putting flowers or the Day of the Dead, or this disgusting thing where this man had his wife put him in his basement.
Yeah. So all of that's exactly right, Sabrina. Those are all elements of how we treat the dead, right? And so the fact that we have these rituals, these ceremonies, and almost every culture has something like it, has some rule about how you treat the dead and deceased. It seems like we're saying they have rights of some kind, or at least have some sort of moral importance. Have any of you seen the Bodies exhibit? these plasticized corpses where they take them and inject plastic into the tissue and they cut them up and like you can like see them like playing basketball or whatever. This exhibit has drawn a lot of attention, as you might expect. Now, on the one hand, most of the bodies are supposedly, at least, people who agreed to give their bodies to this purpose. But there is some concern that some of them are being things like corpses from political prisoners in China and stuff. There's a very specific case that there's some concern about that. Because, I mean, what else do you do with all your dead political prisoners? Might as well sell them, right? And some of them were, so one that drew a lot of attention is a display of two people mid-coitus, right? So two people having sex, two dead bodies, plasticized dead bodies. Right, and that like, they didn't know each other when they were alive, right? And even if they consented to have their bodies used in this way, they might not have consented to that specific display, right? And that drew a lot of attention because it's unclear exactly, well, I mean, how many rights do they get when they're beyond the grave, right? How many of us, or how deeply ingrained is this wish to respect the will of the dead? And is that an appropriate wish or will? So how many of you, this straw poll, find this idea disturbing, that they might be using plasticized corpses without the consent of the former hosts for display purposes? All right, so about half of us. The rest of you think it's pretty much...
Don't you sign over your rights once you dedicate your body to science?
You can, yeah. There is some ambiguity about whether or not these people did. You know, there's someone saying, "Oh yeah, sure they did," but it's hard to tell. You know. Yeah, Sabrina.
But what if they just use their bodies like as an art form instead of like anything else? So like use their bodies like art. So like to have like imagine my body being dead being like used as art, kind of feels disturbing.
Yeah, it's thoroughly disturbing in a weird way, right?
It's like being used as art instead of science.
Yeah. So as you both pointed out, there's this sort of art thing. Well, of course you can leave your body to art, right? I guess. And it's, you know, it's educational in theory, right? You can see the muscles and the bones in a way.
What if they told them, like, hey, I want to be like this when I die?
Yeah.
Pose.
Yeah. So like, if you specify your pose, does that work? So utilitarianism, founded by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Jeremy Bentham sits in a chair at Cambridge, I think. He is a stuffed body. Yeah. He is an auto icon, that's the term for it. See if we can get a nice picture of our Jeremy Bentham here. I don't even know what website I'm on. Okay, so maybe that's
You just Googled it? Because I just Googled it and it came up.
yeah. All right, it'll warm up in a second, and then you'll get to see the still face of Jeremy Bentham, the founder of utilitarianism. I don't know if we get the light switches actually. Might make it easier to see. Are there light switches?
Yeah, on the side.
Ah, right behind me. Well, that made no difference at all, did it?
A little bit.
So this is Jeremy Bentham.
Yeah, so has a straw hat on.
Hmm?
You have a straw hat on?
Yes, he does have a straw hat on.
Do they decorate him for the holidays?
I don't believe so. He actually sits on board meetings.
That's creepy.
And whenever they're tied for a vote,
You look at them and they're like,
he votes for the change. So they'll wheel him out if they're tied, and he votes in debt for change, always for change. Because that's the kind of guy he was. What school is that? I think it's Cambridge he's at. No, that's not it. Oh, University College London. That's right. Yeah, it's right.
So how does he have a right to vote for change debt?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there seems to be a lot of respecting his personhood there, right? He continues to be a voting member of the board. Students who go to University College London have less say over how it operates than Jeremy Bentham's dead body does.
That's insane.
But at the same time, right, we do feel like there are, the dead have certain claims. A family elder who passes on and leaves very specific instructions for how their estate is to be handled. Right? We try to respect those instructions, or it seems like we do anyway, and we get kind of offended when people don't. Right? You know this isn't what they would have wanted, that kind of thing. But maybe this is all just a mistake. Maybe it's just because we look at a dead body and we see a person, but there really isn't a person there, right? There's no more a person there than there are in the animatronics at Disney World. Like, they just look like a human. They look like a being. And there are cases where the rights of former people and actual people come into conflict. So Orthodox Jews don't usually donate organs when they pass because the belief is that when the Messiah comes, there will be a bodily resurrection on earth. And if you've given up parts of your body, or been cremated, God forbid, that may not be possible. And in fact, if you don't put, I want to be an organ donor on your little ID, right, when you die, those organs go on the ground. Of course, those organs could most likely save lives, right? Especially if you have the misfortune of dying young and dying healthy. Even if you don't, so they could probably be of some use to a scientist somewhere, right? Studying whatever killed you. And yet we seem to protect the right of the deceased individual to make claims to what happens to their body over what might be perceived as a right of the ill individual to receive all reasonable medical care. Right. In other words, we take the claim I have over my body, what we call bodily autonomy, which is a basic right, or appears to be. I get to decide what goes in, what comes out, etc., etc. To persist past my death, I say this is what happens to my body, and it's what happens. Bentham says stuff me and put me in a chair, and no matter how creepy it is, they do it. Right? Have some animatronics rigged up. Welcome to University College London, where we seek to maximize the good for all. But we take our claim to bodily autonomy to extend so far that I can tell you that you can't use my dead body to save somebody's life. Is that okay? Or are we just being unreasonably attached to a dead body? What do you guys think? Is it reasonable? Is it appropriate to give this right past death? is it reasonable for us to grant the right of bodily autonomy to a being that has already died? Right? You're already dead. Why should we care what you said you wanted to happen to your body when you're not in it anymore? Sabrina.
I think that it would depend. Like, let's say, like, you know, when you write out like what you want to be buried or cremated, if you have those rights, and then I feel like in regards to like government rights, I feel like that it wouldn't be wrong necessarily to give like your body for like somebody else to do like a heart or something. That'd be like appropriate. That'd be right. That'd be good. I think that's
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts?
I feel like it's wrong because like if you don't want your body to be used in a different way when you're dead, so it kind of like it's like do unto what you would do kind of logic, I guess.
Okay, so yeah, there's definitely one sense in which it's like, look, I don't want people chopping me up and turning me into fertilizer, so I'm not going to do it to Uncle Bill. Mary.
So, a client of mine was telling me that there's a documentary called Finders Keepers
Mm-hmm.
on Netflix. Have you heard about it?
I haven't.
Okay, so this guy, he somehow gets in an accident and his arm gets chopped off.
Uh-huh.
And he decided that he can't be buried without all of his body parts, so he has the arm, like, what is that called? Like taxidermy, I guess?
Yes, like
Right,
stuff to
and
preserve.
he puts it in his like storage unit, and he forgets about it, doesn't pay for it. Another guy buys it. The guy finds the arm and it starts making money off of it as like a show, like you know the arm that's alive but not alive. So this guy ends up finding out about it, and they end up going to court. Like it's like a thing. It was like it's a documentary about it. They end up going to court fighting about it because he has the right to the arm, but then the guy has the right of possession because he bought it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like this, to me, it's still your right. It's still part of your body. Just because they do make money on it, I don't think you should be able to keep it. But if you ask for your body to be taken care of a certain way, I believe like that is your right. You are still alive. It's still your body. You're born with it. I feel like the fact that you're selfish with wanting to keep your internal organs with you, I feel like makes you, I guess, could make you look bad, but I don't think if it's your wish, people should like respect it.
Okay. Raphael?
No, I was going to say that I guess the whole concept ties into the idea of ownership. That
Yeah.
I think I own my own body and I get to say what I want with my body. But I mean, that's what backs it up. I mean, there's no real true foundation. I guess.
Okay, so you think it,
that's the main foundation. That's what I'm saying.
so your thought is that it falls into a maybe an ungrounded idea of ownership? Like there's nothing here. We feel like we own this thing. Right.
That's what backs it.
Yeah, and so there is, right, so you can, one way to justify autonomy is ownership, and if you do that, then you have to justify ownership, right?
Yeah.
Right, so I own my body, perhaps. But I own other things that I don't have total say over, right? So like your pets, there's certain things you can and cannot do, at least morally, to your pets, right? And like I own, you might own, land or whatever, but if you die, it's not clearly left to anyone. It goes to court. Eventually, the government can take it, or at least take a chunk of it, right?
It's theoretical.
Yeah. Well, and like most things you own will be passed on to your next of kin when you pass, right? Your land, your car, your pets, whatever. So why not control of your body, right? So like if you leave your house to someone, to your kids, right? And they say, well, look, I love the house, but can't afford to keep it. The house itself's kind of small, but the land's good. So let's just knock down the house, cut the land up into pieces, and sell it off. I mean, you might be offended by that a little bit, like especially if it's like, I built this house with my own two hands kind of thing, right? But it doesn't seem quite as wrong as like, well, burials are really expensive, so let's just cut mom up and give off all the pieces to people who could use them to save lives. And then just, burn the corpse even though she wanted to be buried. Sabrina.
I was thinking kind of sad, like animals don't have the same rights as humans when they die.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking kind of sad, like how animals don't have the same rights as humans when they die.
Yeah, so there's this really interesting question in animal ethics. So one, if you accept that animals are persons of any kind, right, have any patiency whatsoever, there becomes the question of if they have this, do they get to own their own bodies? And how can they exercise that right? So one way we can exercise our right, sort of prospectively, is I can write a document that says, when I die, do the following. For most of us, this is pretty simple. Give everything I have to my next of kin. Done. And that's just like the default document. But yeah, animals, they can't really express that. But I remember when I was growing up having quite a few pet funerals, right? Have you guys had these?
My sister had a lizard
A
funeral.
lizard funeral.
Yeah, her lizard died. Her pet
Well,
lizard.
people get attached to things.
Like a random bird.
A random bird, yeah.
It was just like in front of my mom one day, and I was crying over. I was like 4. I was all like, "It's dead." I then buried it.
Yeah.
It's my living tree.
Yeah, I mean, animals, we get attached to animals super quickly. We get attached to everything, though. Like, we get attached to a funny sticker on the wall or something, and we come in one day and it's gone. It's like, oh!
There's like this new movie about like this dog and like the commercial was like 2 minutes and by the end of it I was just like full on just crying.
Yeah, a movie about a dog is going to be sad. That's just how it is.
Marley and me makes you feel attached to the dog, and it's like, I don't know this dog. It's only my dog. I'm not holding my dog. Like, or like Will Smith, the 7 pounds, not we don't pounds, I Am Legend, when he kills his dog.
yeah.
I'm just laying there and I'm like, the dog.
It's more upsetting that the dog died than it would have been if Will Smith had died.
When the dog is introduced into the movie, I'm just like, I already know, I'm gonna cry if he dies.
Oh yeah, it's just like the directors are just holding a gun to the dog's head saying, isn't it cute? Don't you love it? Don't you love it?
Even up when Doug's about to fall off the cliff, I'm all like, no. I'm like, I was 16. I'm like, why am I crying over this?
Okay, Up is a legitimately sad movie. So yeah,
Yeah, it is,
like the
but-
first 5 minutes are just like, and you're
My
done.
childhood.
For me, it's Homeward Bound. Have you guys? Has Homeward Bound made it into the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one movie made me cry.
Oh. Shadow looked exactly like one of my dogs I had when I was a kid too, and I was like,
You know when you're walking down the street and you see like a random little wall walking, you're like,
yeah. So we seem to think that like, okay, well, most of us, I think, at least emotionally, feel that animals are at some sense patients, right? It matters how we treat them, right? We get upset when they die. We get angry at people who hurt them, right? Especially pets, whatever that is in your culture and your mindset. Hurting a pet specifically, because there's kind of a special relationship there, maybe. Yeah.
And like mentally ill kids who like play with like dead animals,
Mhm.
like that's like one of like the triggers or it shows that they're mentally ill.
You mean sociopaths and
Yeah.
who are one of the things you'll see is like they'll torment animals even
Right.
young. They don't have that connection to animals being patients. It seems like.
Right. So it's like kind of like just like a human kind of thing that you just don't mess with the dead.
That's
You
certainly
just have
one.
like
But,
a moral thing.
yeah.
You just don't do it.
Of course, there are cultures that eat their dead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
But again, maybe it's like you come in with an expectation, right? So like, when I die, you better eat me. And like they'd be
Like,
really,
that's their wish.
Yeah,
So
right.
technically-
they'd be really offended if you buried them.
there's this guy
It's
who
like a
lost
way to
his
keep
leg,
them
and he told
Sorry.
his friends,
Here they are, yeah.
he lost his leg. I don't know how he lost his leg, like a motorcycle accident or something. And they let him keep it. So he told all his friends, like, it was just a white guy. He was like, oh, let's respect my leg by eating it. So all his friends came over, and he like sauteed his leg and everything, and they ate his leg.
Yeah.
Like,
That's a lot.
Erica, what you're saying?
Oh,
Don't they like eat it as like a part of respecting them so that it can be like a part of them or something?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have a legitimate cultural belief, right? The same kind of belief we have that you shouldn't disturb the dead or whatever. That you should bury them in a box really, really far below the ground, which is honestly a lot of work. And now we put them in these like multi-$1,000 boxes that are like so they never rot or something. It's ridiculous. Funerals are extremely expensive.
It's like 10,000.
Yeah, it's like just beneath weddings in major life events that shouldn't be as expensive as they are. Yeah, and they're not biodegradable, and well, it's meant to not be because they don't want you to get into the water supply, right? So they put you, but you can. There are places you can be buried and just rot. You can also go to will your body to a body farm, which is where forensic anthropologists study like bodies in different states of decomposition. Well, there's like throw you in a lake and let you rot, so people can come and like, so this is what a body looks like after a week in a lake.
No way.
Yeah, this is body to science, right?
They see the body, supposedly the body clock thing where like they like somehow cremate your body to like turn into a tree.
That's really cool.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I don't know,
They like
I don't know
cremate
if
your
you can
body
believe it,
and
I'm
they
curious.
mix it in with like soil or something and they plant a tree. So like
It's pretty cool. I like that.
yeah, they turn into a tree, right? It's kind of cool.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
You can also turn it into a diamond.
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
yeah.
compress it into a diamond.
How?
It's carbon. You're mostly carbon. That's what a diamond is. Diamonds are super common, by the way. The fact that they cost money is ridiculous. We can make them in labs, like, by the pound.
Yeah.
Artificial diamonds actually means chemically perfect diamond. And the way they tell that it's artificial is that it's not messed up like every natural diamond is. So when people complain about artificial diamonds, like, but it's still better than all the other diamonds, and they're cheap enough that we put them on drill tips. So, but like, there are thousands of things you can do with your body after you die, and they're fascinating too, right? Like we're getting, it's like, oh, and then there's this, and then there's this, and you can do that, and you can do that.
And like
Oh, you turn it into a record. I forgot
Yeah, I
about
was
that
looking
one.
at that, I was like, what? I'm like, do that, I'm down.
I'm on board for the tree one. I told my
I
wife,
like
like, just
the
bury
tree.
me under an oak tree and we're good. That'd be great. I mean, also take everything that's useful out of me. If there's anything left, just I don't need it.
It's still good.
Yeah, whatever's good, you pass on to someone else. Whatever's bad, bury under the oak tree.
Are you gonna do like Will Smith and I in 7 pounds? You never seen that movie?
Nah.
He ends up killing himself by putting himself into like ice bath with jellyfish.
Huh.
Where it's like so he can donate all his organs, like his eye and his heart and all that. So he's dead, but the jellyfish feeding him like keeps his body alive. It's crazy, like
He donates his organs to like people who need it.
Like his friends.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
it's a really good movie.
It is.
Like he donates his eyes, he donates his
Those are
heart
useful.
and all that. I'm just like, that's crazy.
He's not using them, right? I mean, killing yourself to do it might be a little much, but
Well, it's a sad ass movie. His wife dies and all that too. It's like a movie. I'm like, it's just like one stab after another stab after another stab, and you're just like, it's like
Yeah.
crazy.
He does it for a mission of redemption because he killed his wife
Mm.
in an accident in car crash.
Okay, so he feels responsible. He's like,
And he killed like a few of their lives, so he probably wants to
okay.
What's the name?
7 pounds? The movie? 7 pounds. Apparently,
It came out like
movie
2000.
recommendation.
On like,
It's on Netflix.
it came out a long time ago.
Okay. Got our movie recommendations now. But so, I mean, it's interesting, right? Lots of people die. Everybody, in fact. And any given day, a lot of us are having our final appointments. But there are people who are savable, right? There are children who could live if we just rip the heart out of someone without asking. Right? So this person's dead, I don't really care. Right? They don't want it to be used this way, but they're gone now.
Are they really doing that
Yeah.
though? Are they doing that illegally and not telling people? 'Cause people are-
Maybe. Probably some people are. It probably also depends on where you're going and so different cultures have different rules and different countries have different laws and have different levels of regulation and but almost certainly someone's doing that, right?
I think like a psych course
Mhm.
when I was in Michigan. And one of they're doing a whole like thing on morals and your philosophy, what you believe in, psych, and they're saying, well, if there's like a 5-year-old dying and there's another 5-year-old who just passed away, but his mother didn't consent to giving his organs away because of the religion or whatever her reasons were, is it still morally right to take his heart and give it to a kid who's living, or do you respect the other person? Or if there's another person who's healthy, but he wants to die. He's telling you, I have suicidal thoughts, I want to die, but he's healthy, but there's a guy who just came into a motorcycle accident who needs the organ that the guys have who wants to die. Are you willing to kill that person to give the healthy organs to them? And it's like, it's a whole thing, and I was just sitting there and I was like I didn't answer them, I didn't know what to answer, so I don't know where to stand on it.
It's a difficult question. And a weird thing is that we actually seem more comfortable with letting someone die to save someone else than we do with harvesting a dead person's organs to save someone else. Right? So you're in a hospital, you got 4 beds, and your 5th patient walks in. And you know one of those patients is probably not going to make it, right? You'd put 5% odds that they actually survive. You're probably going to kick them out of bed. You're going to say, sorry, we need the bed. This patient has a better chance of survival. This is classic textbook triage. But if someone's already dead, right, they're already dead, 0% chance of survival, and all you need to do is, take a liver from them.
That's like playing God too, though, right?
Yeah, sure it is. But remember, so at least for Blackbird.
I've assisted in cornea transplants. I was on the team, so I do see the benefit of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference, but you're right, it is definitely intervening in the natural
And then
order.
and then naturally your body's supposed to go into the earth and feed the earth.
Mhm.
Right.
Or animals or something. Something's going to eat you, right? I mean, also naturally, a lot of us probably wouldn't be here. I'd be dead. Appendicitis would have got me when I was 10. Actually, appendicitis would have gotten my mom when she was 10 or 12. So like multiple generations back, there would be problems. And so there is this thing of, when Blackbird brings it up, right, this concept of playing God. But it's not clear how much, and maybe that's something that comes into here with cutting up a body like it's unnatural, it's unholy. But if your point there is that we're altering the natural flow of things, that's literally what medicine exists to do, right? To stop you from dying as you naturally would have, maybe? Sabrina.
So there's actually like in some states where if you like are sick in some way, like you're sick or something, you can actually have yourself die there. Like something in you that's actually illegal.
This is suicide.
Yeah, and there's this movie I was also watching where the lawyer she was fighting and had this child who was 18 like survived because he wanted to die, and his parents believed that it was the right thing for him to die, so she actually went to court and won the case for him to live. And it was a movie about it. I don't remember the movie.
Yeah, so the euthanasia, right? A good death, which is I'm going to die anyway, or in a case of someone who just wants to die, whether or not that should be allowed. And this is interesting too, right? It seems like you can do anything you want with your body except decide to leave it. Right? We get really offended by suicide for some reason. Right? And legally, right, so euthanasia is illegal everywhere in the United States. There are some countries where it's legal.
No, California it's not.
It's legal here?
No, it's not.
No, it's illegal, right?
Yeah,
that's what I
it's
said,
legal
yeah.
in like Oregon.
Is it legal anywhere in the U.S.? I thought it was illegal
Yeah, it's
everywhere.
legal. It started in Oregon, and then they're trying to make it legal in other states. I was reading about it too because there's people who like there is a person who had like brain cancer, another lady had liver cancer, and another lady had breast cancer, and they're all stage 4. It's untreatable.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're like, well, am I just gonna sit home and die and feel pain, or can I have this moment of where I'm at the state of where I'm in pain, but I'm at the point of where, because within your life you have different points of your life where you can accept death and you can accept life as is, but they already accept the point where they're like, I'm just gonna die, it's fine.
Yeah.
So it's like they're at the point to wait it out. You can't kill yourself. And it's like, if you kill yourself, it's shamed upon you.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird concept, but in Oregon, if you want to, you have to have, well, it's like you have to have a reason why you want to die.
Right.
You have to go through it all. So, if you wanted to die, you have to sign away all your rights. And, you know, you get killed, they give you a shot. You're sitting there with your family. You come to acceptance, you're gonna die. You don't want to be a pain no more. It's like, why can't you do that anywhere else? If you're in so much pain, you know you're not gonna live. It's like death is like you can't run away from death. Death is always gonna be there.
Yeah.
And it's like you can kill yourself and have your family around you. Like they all come to terms with it. You come to terms with it. It's like why not?
I mean, heck, you can do it if you can do it in a hospital as opposed to at home in your bathtub. You get to make sure that your organs are okay, right? So weird thing, right? If someone comes to the door with like a bomb vest on, right, and I tackle them and we go fly out the door and I blow up and die and everyone else is safe, I'll be like, there'll be front page news around the country, right? But if I had a terminal illness and killed myself so that I could save 5 or 6 people through the harvesting of my healthy organs,
It made you
like, how dare you, right?
Most people, like, you know, when people kill themselves while they rush into the hospital
Hmm.
and stuff to try to save you, most people believe that, well, there's this whole study on it. If you killed yourself, it's like, it's either black or white. It's either you believe that they're selfish and they don't get to have the right to not die. Like, you have to save them, you have to make them have a better life, you have to 5150 them, it's do all this. But there's another one who's like, if they don't want to die, you should be able to die. So it's like, when you take it to the hospital for the organs and all that, some people are like, don't keep the organs, because it's like, you don't know what they put in their organs and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, or it's like, their organs are, like, they're so, like, they've been gone for so long, their organs, like, die within a couple hours, right? So it's just
Fairly,
like,
yeah. So that's why hospital euthanasia might be effective. I think Erica has a point too.
I'm not sure if it was real, but like, I think there was one case where like someone tried to commit suicide and then they were able to save them, and then after they were like, I think they tried to sue because they were like, I wanted to die, you guys brought me back to life.
Yeah.
that was here, there's like 5 courses about it, cases about it. It's like, if I wanted to die, and you sat there and you wouldn't get to my wishes, I wanted to die, I don't want to be here anymore, so much is going on with me. It's like, they're gonna try killing themselves, like, I mean, like, it's only like, it's like, I think it's like 20-25% of people after they try killing themselves for the first time will try again. But it's like, there's a lot of people who will sue the hospital or sue like their parents or sue people who find them
Oh yeah.
for trying to revive them, because it's like, that's not what I wanted.
It's a violation of bodily autonomy, right? I did not consent to the medical treatment
Exactly,
that you
like,
put me under.
I hurt my back really bad, and it's like saying that like, I didn't consent to
Right.
having all this surgery to my back, having to take all these pills and all this stuff. It's like, I didn't want that. Like, I didn't consent to having someone else's blood, but it's like, there's also people, like, I see it as like a good thing, you know what I mean? Like, I survived, whatever. But there's people who will be like, I didn't consent to that, I didn't consent to this. Like, you know, like, there's a lot of religions who don't believe in like the whole blood thing, so it's like, they still, there's a lot of cases of them suing the hospital because it's like they have to save people and they put blood inside of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're unconscious, you're dying. It's like, sometimes you just do it.
Yeah.
You know, you're not there to tell, oh, my religion doesn't let me do that, so it's like, right after, they have to sue.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta make a guess, right? When someone comes in unconscious, you don't get to ask them what they want.
Yeah.
Could you like make the argument that like suicidal people don't have the rational thought to make that decision for themselves?
Certainly a common argument, right? So when you talk about how you might define, say, insanity, oftentimes the intentional pursuit of self-harmful things is one of the things. Of course, we don't call people who smoke insane. I guess we might call them addicts, and that's maybe a psychological condition, but that is an intentional pursuit of a self. Or people who ride motorcycles, or people who don't exercise. Sorry. But yeah, right, these are risk-taking activities. People who jump out of planes. Making this personal, aren't I? People who drink too much coffee. I'll throw myself in there. Otherwise, I'm an exceedingly boring person. And so it is tricky, right? Again, it's like how far, and is it possible that there's ever a point where a rational person would choose to die? And it might be, right? If you were just, hey, you're not going to die for 40 years, but it's going to be a long 40 years. Let me tell you, you'll be in paralytic pain for the rest of your life or something. Like we can keep you alive, but, and we do respect do not resuscitate orders, which is different from suicide because of something, right? We do respect living wills, right? Unplug me if I last 2 weeks before I come out or whatever, right? So we do respect that kind of thing. Maybe you could short circuit this by putting yourself in a life-threatening position with a DNR on you, and then being like, There's a really interesting case recently, by the way, where someone had "Do Not Resuscitate" tattooed on their chest.
Seen that.
And they came into the ER and the doctors was like, is this a band? Like, this could really be in the name of a band. I don't know. Is this an actual DNR? Or does he just like a band called "Do Not Resuscitate"? Because there's almost certainly a band called "Do Not Resuscitate." There has to be like probably 5 or 6, right? And they went ahead and saved the patient. It was a genuine DNR, right? He was furious and he sued, and the hospital was like, okay, we got to talk about this. This is going to be complicated.
Right. There's people who will commit suicide, will try to, and you're gonna get into a coma, and it's like, why are you wasting money on someone who tried dying, and like stuff like that, and they want to die, but they keep them on. And there's people who are willing to be like, oh, you have 2 weeks, just take me off. It's like, why are they different?
Yeah.
You know?
And it's weird, right? So yeah, we respect this, and we respect if you have a living will of like, hey, if I'm brain dead, just keep me alive long enough to get the lungs out, and let me go. We also have this weird thing where we seem to divide between letting die and killing. Right. So someone is a DNR or they're in a coma or whatever. So the Terry Schiavo case was very big when I was younger, but I don't know if that's probably too long ago. But so you got someone in a coma for an indeterminately long period of time. They've got a living will that states, unplug, let me die as quickly as possible once a month of brain deadness continues. Right? I'm not coming back, just let me go. But the way they do that is just like removing a feeding tube and letting you starve to death or something. And that sounds horrific, right? Like, if you're gonna let them die, let them go out easy. It seems like the right choice, maybe. But then that starts sounding a lot more like this, and then people start getting uncomfortable because we're talking about assisted suicide, and Dr. Kevorkian comes back up. And there's some physicians who will say things like, when you're dealing with someone in a terminal illness with a great deal of pain, you administer enough painkillers to alleviate pain, and sometimes the alleviation of pain causes the suppression of respiration, and that's just how it is. Which is a kind of sneaky way to get to euthanasia, right? It's like, look, we're just giving them enough medicine so it doesn't hurt anymore, and it just so happens that was enough medicine to kill them. Whoopsie! Oh, I put the decimal in the wrong place. And actually, there's conflict about this even within the medical community, right? Of how you ought to go about doing it, whether it could ever be ethical or ever be just. Even if it is illegal, you might still fudge the numbers or make a medical error so that what you wanted to happen happens. Yeah.
I know this, okay, when you said, this doesn't apply to life and death right now, but this is what you said about the whole, what if I throw myself on top of a bomb person, I'll be on front pages and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. You know how, it's not morality probably, or about your philosophy in life. You know how whenever there's a big thing, this sounds, I don't want to get controversial, but
It's okay to be controversial.
I know, okay, say like Columbine. You
Okay.
know how like all those kids die and stuff, and then you have like the injured ones, you have the teacher who died, you have like everyone else has their trauma. It's like everyone got, everyone was grieved over all those kids, and it's like, but it's like, and those parents, they got all the condolences, and everyone's getting condolences and stuff. But what about the like Dylan and what's his name? What about their mom? What about their moms? What about their families? Like, they didn't, they probably didn't know that their kid's gonna be a fucking serial killer. Like, they didn't know it, and it's like, they shame that family, but they give condolence to the kids who died too. It's like, yeah, well, their kids died too. It's like, their kids killed themselves and their kids turned out to be serial killers. It's like, no one, that's what, I can see when people are mad. It's like, that's your kid. You did that, but it's also like, within their life, it's like, it's kind of like, it's controversial to me. It's like, it's about your morality of how you, your views on people and stuff, and it's just like,
They have to deal with like the thought that their kids
Yeah,
killed
like-
a bunch of other kids,
Yeah,
and
it's-
then they die.
yeah, it's
So it's
like,
like a double
it's like,
whammy.
how did I raise that? It's
Right.
like, like Dylan, I can't remember his last name, but the Dylan
Dylan
was,
Roof.
yeah.
The
he's-
Charleston AME,
Huh?
the Charleston, South Carolina shooting of the church.
No, one of the guys' names from Columbine and seems Dylan.
Oh, okay.
His mom she does motivational speaking. She's like, my son did that, and it makes me feel like a parent. Like, I failed my kid, but also like my child wanted to die. So it's like, if I have a kid who wanted to die, and then there's another kid who wanted to kill, it's like, and they got together, it's like, you know what I mean? It's a whole thing, but it's like, it makes me like question how people see other people through that, because it's like,
Like, why don't the moms get?
yeah, like, why doesn't that family get compassion because their kids turn out to be psychotic, and not psychotic, but like they turn out to be, because you don't know exactly what's going through their heads, and what they did was wrong. I'm not condoning it. What they did was wrong. But it's like, why doesn't that family get, I'm sorry your son turned out to be like this, and I'm sorry your son died. You lost someone that you carried for 9 months. You took care of all your life. You had that love, you had everything to go for that, but it's like, like the other kid's family, they never come out. They never came out. They sent condolences. They said, I'm sorry to the families personally, but it's like, they never came out to like the media. They never, it's even to this day, like they're trying to make that family say something, and they're like, I'm not gonna say anything. Like, my kid's dead too. So it's kind of like, as a person, how do you see death? How do you see someone dying? Where do you put your point? Where do you put the line of where I feel compassion for a family and I feel compassion for you? Because it's like, even like the kid who shot up the church,
Yeah.
even about the kid who shot up Sandy Hook and all that, how do you feel about their families? You know what I mean? It's like, how do you feel about that mother who sat there and cried about her own son dying, but it's like, and there's people who are like, does she have the right to cry? It's like, does she have the right to cry about her serial killer who's a son? But it's also like, like, it's like, you didn't, like I said, like, you did, like, life and death, you don't think all that, but it's like, you do between your life, it's like, does she get to cry about the actions? Do you feel bad about crying over that? Do you feel bad for feeling remorse for the kid, or feel remorse for that family? Like, it's like, where does your line for compassion stop?
It's almost a version of the question of patiency.
Yeah.
Right. Can you stop being a patient because you did something horrible?
Or like those people
Right.
who go into the people who like what was it? In Columbine, I really got into it because because that's what I wanted to study, and for school I wanted to go into the whole mind of it. What triggers it, what does it? So it's like they wrote Southern Diaries. They said it's either if we live and we, like, say if the bombs do go off, if everything dies, if all 4 people die, we don't die, and they take us, we're gonna become legends. So it's like, if they got hurt somehow and they went to the hospital, are they gonna treat them with the same, as the medical team gonna treat them with the same respect that they treat young people within people who were shot and all that, or are they gonna,
Yes,
like,
you kind of have to.
Yeah.
But it's in the military,
You
it
have to
doesn't matter if you're an
block
enemy or an ally. Like, you'll see combat mechs carrying, ISIS members to safe zones, and gonna have to flip off that like it's life or death. Every life has value. In a sense. I mean, now if every medic follows that, that's but yeah,
Those are the rules.
which is crazy. I mean, like yeah.
I mean, like, that's what I'm saying, or like, you know, like, stuff like that, it's like I said, when does your line of compassion stop? When does your line of your moral rights of that's right or wrong, when does that stop?
Right.
You know, where does your line,
Well, the names of what was it, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. I just looked those up. Somewhere. But so like, you're asking,
I'm
like,
not interested.
did their value of life, was it less than the people that they were killing due to their actions, like just because they committed that horrible, action?
That's why I say, like, do you feel compassion for them? Because I don't, okay,
Yeah, in a sense. I
Eric
mean,
Harris
doesn't
wanted
justify
to
their
kill.
actions.
He wasn't suicidal or anything. He was really narcissistic and he was a psychopath. He didn't feel any remorse. He didn't feel any regret. So when you look into it, it's like he also had depression. He was narcissistic. He had all these characters, all these like things with him. So it's like, do you feel compassion for a narcissistic? Do you feel compassion for a psychopath? Do you? It's like it's your moral questions, and it's like, it's what's his name? Dylan. I can't remember his last name. I remember he just said it too.
Klebold.
Yeah.
K-L-E.
Klebold. It's like he wanted to die. He tried killing himself. He was on, like one of them was on antidepressants while they were shooting. So it's like, do you feel compassion for him because he was on antidepressants and the drugs influenced him in some type of way? Did him being around another psychopath and narcissistic change your mind about him as a depressed kid who just wanted to do something? So it's like, where does your mind go from that's right, that's wrong, well maybe, or So it's like,
Speaking of narcissistic behavior, like I read something the other day saying it can't be cured. Like
Yeah.
it can. It's a trait that you develop over time. So it's like if you have narcissistic tendencies, it's like you still feel compassion and stuff like that. But if you're narcissistic, majority of people don't feel compassion for anyone else. It's like it's a taught thing. It's like let's say like a kid who's small and they have a parent who neglects them, so it's like they have to do everything by themselves. Most people become narcissistic, or most people become depressed. There's a lot of studies about it, but if you become narcissistic, it's because you did everything yourself and you feel that you're better than everyone else, and you only care about yourself. So it's like those kids who are left alone a lot, or the people who are overachievers become really narcissistic because they see themselves higher than anyone else, and they see themselves as a god.
Well, there's a difference between narcissistic in the terms of like an egoist or someone who's a bit selfish or whatever, like the way we use it in everyday conversation, and narcissistic personality disorder, which is a personality disorder and therefore pervasive, incurable, like sociopathy, like borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, a bunch of others like that.
Well, there's pills for you to take if you're narcissistic and stuff, where they can help you, but it's like
Symptom mediation, maybe, like this will kind of help. I think Erica, Sophia, and then Sabrina all wanted to jump in on this. I don't know if you still want to jump in or if we let it wait too long.
I was just gonna, when she was talking about how, the mom, I was just like, oh yeah, I saw her, that video, she did
The TED Talk?
to TED Talks, yeah.
Sabrina, you got a point?
I was gonna say, like, you don't really wanna have compassion for people who endanger the community. So those people, they endanger it, so we don't have compassion to let them back in because they can hurt the social group again. And we have more priority over the group, over the mentally ill individual, I would say.
When they died, when the Columbine killers died, they had, it wasn't at the, how at the school, how they have the memorial around it? They did a memorial for them to somewhere else on the field. And there is 2 crosses for them. Eric had, he should have died, and all that, like, they have more negative thoughts about Eric than Dylan, because he's because, Dylan was depressed, and Dylan, they weren't, like, the way that they paint kids from them, it's way different than the way that they really were. They paint them as outcasts, as losers and stuff, but it's like, Eric was really confident. He had, there's videos of him talking to girls, but he made him see outcasted himself. And that's what he was, and it's like Dylan went to prom, like literally 4 days before everything. So it's like, people felt Dylan and Eric, and it's like, but why? Why? And it's like there was people writing like, I'm so sorry that, you know, like no one listened to you. I'm so sorry that, you know.
Yeah, there's that whole like it's because they
like,
got
if I
bullied or
sat
something.
there and I, you know, like it's like, why would? But it's like he also, it's like, you know, like there's people like.
Let me tell you, being the quiet, nerdy kid in class after Columbine got really weird.
Yeah, like
Everyone's like,
you know,
"How you doing?"
Everyone's
Doing
like,
okay?
Everyone's like, oh yeah, always talks
Reading
to
a
weird
book?
white kid. Everyone's like, oh yeah, always talks to that really weird white kid that's sitting in the back of the class one day. It's like, no, like they weren't those weird white kids that sat in the back of the class and were like, I only play Doom. And it's like, no, like they went to prom. They were like, you know, like they did everything that they didn't do everything every other kid did, but you know, like they weren't like outcasts. It's like, like yeah, Eric Harris was like, hey, they told that one guy, hey, I like you, now leave. It's like, or like they like, or like Josh. I can't remember his last name. His name's Josh. When there was a library, he was like, hey Dylan, or hey Eric, hey Dylan. He's like, hey Josh. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, you know, killing people. And he's like, why? And he's like, and then he didn't say anything. He was like, you know what? I like you, run. And he's like, what? He's like, run. So when he started running, the other one was just like, post me, let him go, whatever. You know, and so it's like, did they feel compassion at some point? It's like, were they really all egotistical? Are they all psychopaths? It's like when I said like the memorial thing, it's like, it makes me think like, why weren't people more compassionate for Eric, but people are compassionate for Dylan? It's like, it makes me like wonder about people's morals and how people think about their philosophy in life, like, and like, you know, like their thought process, like,
It's like, you don't have compassion for Hitler, but his like,
his whole
So-
backstory. It's like
right,
it's
sad.
it's sad, you know,
He's
like
Hitler, so
it's like he's Hitler. He killed millions.
Right.
Of people. It's like he killed so
and
many
then
people.
his soldiers, it's like they kind of got off the hook. So it's like,
Did they?
well, some got let go. They went to like trials and stuff. The ones who got captured.
Like the ones in New York that finally went to jail.
yeah, some
Yeah,
went to
like
jail,
stuff
but
like
like they didn't die. They weren't like executed. So it's kind of
Or
like
it's like what was that one kid that
followers have more rights than
or like the ones that Charles Manson, the whole Manson clan, like the females, it's like people feel compassion for them, like why can't they get out of jail right now? Like they're all in LSD supposedly. It's like, but they killed. It's like
Let's bring in Sabrina, because I think she had a comment a little bit ago.
Oh, I think the thing about Jeffrey Dahmer.
What?
I think the thing about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, Dahmer. Okay.
Hi, but like, well, usually I feel like someone's sympathy for him, like, because you read about his story and like it's like he was sympathy for like everybody who goes out and murders because they have problems. Like, what would happen then is like you have problems, you don't go out and murder. Oh, like, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But then like I don't know, like I know when people their lives, it's like, well, I'm sorry that happened. So like I watched with my friend Dahmer, and it made me like all sad. And I was like, Mom, I feel so bad for this guy. Mom's like, why do you feel bad for him? He's so many people. So it's like I don't know. And then like I had a face where I felt bad for Adolf Hitler. I'm like, oh, poor guy. Yeah. And it's like, should you or should you not feel bad for these people, especially like different homicides and people who like were weird, like Hannibal Lecter. Should you feel bad for him for running people's bodies and being weird like that? Like, should you be like, it's okay, I'm sorry that happened to your family, that happened to you?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, obviously, like, should you still show them compassion and love, or should you be like, I really kind of don't want to be next to you?
Yeah. But I'm going to take a moment to recommend this book to anyone who's enjoying this conversation, called The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal. Wiesenthal was a Holocaust survivor who recounts a story of his time in the camps where he was asked to come to the bedside of a Nazi officer who was dying from wounds, proceeded to tell him all the terrible things he did, and then asked for forgiveness on the part of the Jewish people. And and Wiesenthal just left. He didn't offer any forgiveness. He didn't say anything. But then the rest of the book after that are philosophers, political theorists, religious leaders writing their responses about whether or not he should have forgiven.
okay.
So it's you got Desmond Tutu, you've got Pope John Paul II, you've got Nelson Mandela, and you've also got a bunch of academic philosophers and other religious leaders, and An interesting divergence of opinion. Mary, did you have a hand up?
That's, yeah, okay.
I think Mary has
If
a
anyone's
point.
Catholic, I don't wanna offend you. I'm
Well,
sorry.
let's get a new voice in real quick. Mary had her hand up a minute ago, but we'll come back to you.
It's okay. Yeah, it's getting really intense. I would just say, because everyone was talking about why do you feel bad about that person or that sort of thing, but I think most people find it difficult because you can't feel bad for someone who put themselves in a situation that they would really need in, and they willingly participated in, and they willingly took the choice of everyone else to want to live or not. It's not your saying who's to say like you're able to make that judgment. And I
Right.
think at the same time, like regardless of what someone's background is, that's no excuse to go around hurting someone. I think also it's I don't know exactly like how to put it, but if your parents are the parents of the people who chose to commit those mass murders, I feel like it's almost, they were saying how they should feel bad for them, but I feel like it's almost difficult because then it takes away from what the other parents are experiencing. Not that they're not sad and upset, but at the
Right.
same time, like, how do you not know that your kid is planning a mass murder? What are you not doing to pay attention? Because I know when my niece is talking to a boy, how do you not know that they're planning a mass murder? How
And
do you
with the
not?
Columbine and all that, the kids, they got arrested for trying to steal.
Oh yeah, like I've watched all the documentaries and
Yeah,
all
but
that
it's
stuff. Like, I still find what you're saying. I completely understand, but I just completely disagree. There's no way that you can not know that you're troubled, not troubled. Like that gives you no right or excuse to take a life of anyone
I
at all.
completely agree with you. Like what they did was wrong. That's the reason why I'm saying like how people have compassion for Dylan. It's like he still killed 5 people. He still shot 5 people point blank period. He still threw bombs at people. He still wanted to murder over 400 people inside that cafeteria alone. It's like, so that's what I'm saying. Why do people feel more compassion for Dylan than Eric? It's like, well, he wanted to kill too. So it's like, that's what makes me think like, why do people have, that's why I'm saying, where does your Morris and where does your compassion line stand? So it's like, that's what I'm saying, like, I don't feel bad for them, I don't. What they did was what they did. Their backstory, yeah, it's sad, whatever, like, they felt like they were outcasts, they felt like high school was so shitty. It's like, yeah, high school's shitty, everyone knows high school's shitty.
Right, but
I don't care,
The
high school's shitty, but it's
Dylan
like,
guy was more of like the follower, right?
no. If you read their diaries, if you watch any documentary, if you actually get into it, it's like the whole psychology aspect. If you get through the whole philosophy aspect of it, it's like he wanted to kill. Like he told they both played they say that Doom was a really big influence on it. And
What
it's a
was
game.
Doom?
It's a video game.
First person shooter where you kill a bunch of
it was like a
monsters.
90s game. There's like Doom 1, Doom 2, Doom 3, and then the movie that they watched.
The new Doom's supposed to be really good. Sorry.
You're like, I play it all the time.
Finally.
he's like, I'll play it. But it's like Dylan wanted, it's like, I really don't
Right,
think
they both
they
wanted
both
to.
wanted to, and it's like, I don't feel compassion for them. It's like,
Right.
yeah, you were depressed. It's like, okay, I think it's like 1 in every 3 people are depressed. 1 in every 5 people are depressed. It's like, everyone, he was an antidepressants and all that, but it's also like, like I said, he shot 5 people point blank period.
Right.
Eric Harris shot 8, but it's also like I said, they both made bombs. They both went into the shooting ranges. They both have those videos of them saying, like, racial remarks. They both have for everything, and they both have their hatred. So it's like,
Well, you're asking why you would have more compassion for one than the other, and like, because I'm saying it's because one had more ideas and was kind of the alpha compared to the other kid.
Yeah.
So the leaders kind of have more responsibility to the follower.
so you're saying that it's like he was more of a follower than a.
Yeah, he was more of the follower than the other kid.
That's why people are like, well, if he never.
Right,
met
that's why
Eric,
he
would
gets
have
more
done.
compassion, but like, he still shouldn't get compassion, but that's
I feel bad for the, like I said, I know most people won't feel bad for them, but it's like, I do and I don't, because like I said, how do you not know your kid's a fucking mass murderer? How do you not know your kid's like a school shooter or something? It's like, it's also like, they went through the whole, like, they went through a whole psych course of where they're like, yeah, we're fine now, like, yeah, mom, and it's like, everything was in plain sight, but it's also like, I feel like it's like, they don't wanna realize it. It's It's like, you know, like when your mom knows, like
Every-
person, like it's like my mom knew like in high school, like your kid's like, yeah, my kid doesn't party, my kid doesn't do that. It's like my kid doesn't drink. He doesn't. It's like I don't like, you know, it's like in the background of your head, you're like, my kid's not home on a Saturday night. What is she doing? It's like you know what your kid's doing, but it's like you don't want to accept it or like acknowledge it. So it's like
Some parents are more in touch than others. I mean, they could have just honestly been oblivious to it, which I doubt. But at the same time, I've met parents that like, you have no idea what your daughter is doing. Like,
No, Eric Harris, he got arrested. He got.
Could be
they
coming home
found
from
a
their
pipe
third
bomb by his
third job
house.
today.
yeah, I mean, that could be it.
Like,
Was
I feel
working
like-
3 shifts at the minimum wage
I feel
job.
like the Harris family would have known more because it's like Eric Harris, he got so there was a bomb by the house, so it's
So, I
like
mean,
crazy.
There's all sorts of specific issues with the case, but there's also these sort of general principles that seem to come up, which is, one issue is that the more agentic you seem to be, that is, the more in control of your actions you seem to be, the less we're willing to give you compassion in these sorts of cases. That seems to be roughly right. So we seem to, like, illness, desperation, and authority are just to be like psychological illness specifically, right? You're not in control of yourself, so we're going to give you some compassion. There is the, this quote, always, right? Forgive them, for they know not what they do, from the Bible, as Jesus is being crucified. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do.
I mean, to the extent of like overall they don't know what they're doing, or just like they don't know that they're killing somebody right now.
So an interesting question to ask yourself is, would anyone who is rational willingly do evil things? And so Aristotle, for instance, believed that if you did bad things, it was because you were incapable somehow, right? Either you didn't know, or you were such a weak-willed person you couldn't control yourself, right? You're like an animal. And we shouldn't be any more, we should treat you like we would a rabid animal or something. Like, look, you knew better, but you just couldn't put it together.
Let the rational thought control yourself.
Right. And there's also the possibility of things called moral monsters, people who have done such terrible things or are built in such a terrible way that they just are horrific, right? They're almost non-human. You can think of examples of these because these people almost always end up on the news, right? They did something horrific to a child or whatever, and you're just going, this is so far out, like so far out there that there's no way this is okay. Also, one thing that probably might help us have sympathy for the Columbine kids is because they were kids, right? If it had been like 2 40-year-olds doing this, immediately I feel like the sympathy erodes quite a bit, so that's another case of more agentic, less patient. Yeah, Sabrina.
Like, when I read on the news that these 2 boys beat up this Mexican man, and like these 2 kids, these children, they let this old man die. He was disabled and handicapped. In the wire, they were asking for help, somebody help. He was trying to ask for help, but they just video recorded it, put it on YouTube, and were laughing their heads off.
Yeah.
Like, that's wrong.
Potentially like this. And there's this thing called constitutive luck, which is the fact that you are not a psychopath is not due to your own merit. It's due to the fact that you just lucked out genetically, right? Someone else got wired wrong and you didn't. You didn't do that. It just didn't happen to you. And that's your good fortune and their bad fortune. Brian and I think Sophia, did you still have a point?
No.
Brian.
Well, when we were talking about the 2 boys, I feel like for me, I probably wouldn't feel compassion for either. Like, in my opinion, like, if you're a killer and you kill people, you don't deserve compassion or anything because, like, you're putting other people's hard way and deciding the fate for them when everyone should be able to just live peacefully and not have, like, these worries that, we might get bombed every day or who knows if we'll get shot on the street. I feel like if those people put others in danger, they don't deserve our compassion whatsoever.
Okay. I mean, so there's this issue of what it means to deserve, what the function of compassion is. So Sophia brought up a point earlier, I think, that compassion serves to sort of reinforce and protect the community, right? And so if you're a danger to that community, you're excluded from that. That's sort of moral exile, which is definitely a possibility. In the final chapter of this book, before we move on to politics next, which as many of you are already reading, we're going to talk about the foundations of ethics, many of which will touch on issues like, is ethics good for you? Does being a bad person mean you're suffering? That sort of thing. Yeah, I'll be here for any questions. See you all on Monday. Good talk.